now is Nick Troiano. He is the founding executive director of Unite America, a philanthropic venture fund that has invested over $50 million in nonpartisan election reforms and ballot initiatives to foster a more representative and functional government. He was also a congressional candidate for Pennsylvania's 10th district back in 2014. He has a new book coming out soon called The Primary Solution: Rescuing Our Democracy from the Fringes. He joins us now. Nick Troiano, welcome and good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Laura. Great to be with you.
So we're about 431 days or so away from the general election, which means it's much closer to the primary elections than people maybe want to admit. And we have an RNC pool of candidates on debate stages. There's another one coming up later on this month as well. But primaries obviously are extremely important to our democratic functioning. And one of the things you talked about is that in a divided America, which we continue to have, the biggest solvable problem fueling political extremism and dysfunction, you say, is hiding in plain sight. The answer is party primaries. Tell me why.
Well, Laura, most Americans don't feel our government represents them right now or is responsive to the issues they care about. And they happen to be right. It's not just that the politicians who are the problem, it's the broken system that determines how those politicians get elected. More importantly, how the election system influences what they do in office. And in our view at Unite America, our system of party primaries is the biggest solvable problem fueling division and dysfunction in our politics today. You know, we concentrate a lot on November general elections, but in reality, the elections that are responsible for electing most people to office in our Congress and our state legislatures happens long before November, and that's the party primary when both parties select their candidates. And the challenge with party primaries today is that because they have very exclusionary rules of who can participate, millions of Americans are disenfranchised. And because most leaders fear getting primaried out of office by someone to their extreme, they disincentivize our leaders from working together to solve problems. So we're left with a Congress that doesn't represent a majority of Americans because a majority of Americans do not elect our Congress under our current election system.
So when you look at this, I mean, and it's no real shock to say, I don't think I'm going on a limb when I say people have a lot of lack of trust, shall we say, in our members of Congress and government overall, not any particular person, I would say, but just overall, the commentary has been, look, bureaucracy can be a big mess. It can be unproductive. It can be unaccountable. In fact, there's polling that shows that only 20% of Americans think that Congress is even doing a good job. But you've got 90% of incumbents being reelected. It's one of the biggest advantages anyone in a race could have. Maybe it's a kind of political inertia. And so why and how do you think this discrepancy is attributed?
Well, the reason why 90% of our elected officials are getting reelected despite having a 20% approval rating is because we don't have a way of holding them accountable. Our elections are no longer competitive in most places between both political parties. So if we want better results from government, we have to have an election system that allows the voters to actually hold our elected officials accountable. And so in our view, the solution is to replace partisan primaries with nonpartisan primaries. This means that all the candidates, regardless of party, run on one ballot. All the voters get to participate in that election. And it gives voters a lot more power because they have better choices. They can choose who they want to represent them, again, regardless of party. And the top finishers from this primary go to the general election, and whoever wins a majority of the vote gets elected. It simply shifts the incentives of our leaders from representing a small sliver of their base to having to need to be representative of and responsive to the vast majority of their constituents. And this isn't just theoretical. 4 states have already done this. More states are working towards it. Alaska was the latest when voters there adopted the country's first top 4 nonpartisan primary in 2020. And what we saw when it was used for the first time last year was that there was record high participation. There was more competition than ever before. And most importantly, there were candidates who were rewarded rather than punished for taking a unifying approach and wanting to represent a broad coalition of voters.
What would it take to get people to implement these solutions and think about it that way?
Well, the reason why I think the primary solution is the most important thing we can be focused on, it's not the only thing that needs to be done in our politics, but it's, I think, what we should prioritize because it's the most powerful, is that it doesn't require a constitutional amendment or act of Congress. These rules can be changed at the state level through the legislatures or through ballot initiatives in half the states that allow citizens to directly put this question on the ballot. And so when we look at the 2024 elections, we know voters in Nevada will have this on the ballot. Voters in Oregon will be able to vote for part of this policy because ranked choice voting will be on the ballot. And other states from South Dakota to Idaho to potentially Colorado are working on this. And so there's a silver lining that no matter how dysfunctional and divisive our politics seems, we still have the tools to fix it. And that's the history of our country, that we are able to innovate and evolve our election system to put voters first. We've done that before and we can do it again.
I'm looking forward to reading your new book. It's called The Primary Solution, everyone, Rescuing Our Democracy from the Fringes. It's coming out in March. It's written by our guest today, Nick Troiano. Thank you so much for joining me.